this was budget, much as 126 million be set aside for all of those
Doesn't
initiatives.
say matches for teachers. Why she left everything else out? That no line together.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, you're good. No worries.
Yeah, Fabiola's over there setting up for me for the briefing. Kevin's
Is that a
handed
package
Ashley
for
to
Stephanie?
bring swag.
How did it?
Oh, Stephanie's sharp, man.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's sharp. There's a good balance of time. Getting a point across transparently.
Is everyone ready?
Sir.
Time is now 2:08 p.m. and this meeting has been duly posted. We have a quorum. Good afternoon and welcome to the Superintendent's Evaluation Ad Hoc Committee meeting of the Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees. Please stand and join us for a moment of silence and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and a salute to the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to these, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I'd like to recognize the ad hoc committee members who are present today, starting on my right and your left. Trustee Edwin Flores, Trustee Justin Henry is my far left, and we're joined by Dr. Michael Hinojosa, our Superintendent of Schools, and I'm Dan Mitchkay. Trustee Flores, would you do the honors?
Si hay alguien que necesita un servicio de intérprete, le vamos a tener que hablar a alguna señorita porque aquí no hay nadie hoy, día de hoy.
Trustees, our agenda calls for a discussion of the Superintendent of Schools Evaluation Instrument and the 2018-19 targets. And Pam, I assume you have put together a presentation to accompany these suggested numbers.
Well, we have the document in front of each trustee, and so we can proceed just by explaining what the goals are, as well as the KPIs. So if we start off just with Lone Star Governance, one of the pieces of that document is to align the superintendent's evaluation with our district goals. So on this first page, you can see we have 3 goals there. 60% of this evaluation tool is academic achievement. And you can see the teal colored, the blueprint represents each of the goals. So goal 1, 2, and 3 are reflected also in the district goals. And I can just start, with the first goal. The first goal looks at domain 1 with all subjects in the STAR, or the state assessment. Our baseline data was 39%, which was 2016-17, and we're looking to project 47% in the year 2022, so a 5-year projection. If we go over to the history, you can see the baseline is 2016-17 at 39%. You see 17-18, we're at 43%, and we placed the targets. The proficient would be 44%. And you can see right before is the somewhat satisfactory, and then the clearly superior. From there, we go down to...
Let me stop you there, because I think in terms of reading this chart, this will apply to everything else that we have there. So under the column 2019 performance target, we have US, which means unsatisfactory.
Correct.
SS means
somewhat satisfactory.
FS.
Fully satisfactory.
Fully satisfactory.
And then clearly superior.
And that legend's on the second page at the bottom.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay. And so those are the targets that we set for the actual goal, which is written in blue. And then under that, we have the KPIs. So we have 5 KPIs there, and actually that last one should be KPI 1.5. I have 2 1.4s. So we can see 1.1 and 1.2, 1.3 are really the content of the goal is the same, with the exception 1.1 is focusing on approaches standard for STAR. 1.2 is meets performance standard. 1.3 is masters performance standard. And, you know, on 1.1, you can see the history. We've been progress monitoring that particular target for multiple years. So that's why we have the numbers across that particular row. If we look at...
Just a question on that. Have we changed this on our goal, the KPIs for our goals to incorporate the you know, the 3 measuring points instead of just the passing measuring point?
Yes, and we will be bringing the goals because we also have to bring AE November. And so yes, we have. They're in approaches, meets, and masters.
Okay.
And I need to make one statement on, when we change from approaches to meets, it's a percent, but when we talk about domain, it's not a percent, and that is an index value, not a percent. I made the correction just now, sorry about that.
I'm sorry, so KPI 1.4, the domain is not a percent, it's a, is that what you're?
Oh, on KPI 1.1 it is. I was referring back to the goal, the domain. I'm sorry, got behind. The blue is a domain, is an index value, and then KP 1.1, we are talking about approaches, so then it goes back to the percent.
So if we go to 1.4, we're being intentional about focusing on our African American student group, and we are looking at the meets level. And so if we're looking at our 17-18, our most recent value, we're at 29% at meets for our African American student group. So our targets, our unsatisfactory would be anything under 29. Somewhat satisfactory, we would be at 29. Fully satisfactory would be at 30%, and clearly superior would be at 31%. The last area in this particular goal is looking at state economically disadvantaged versus our district economically disadvantaged. And you can see, just looking at the history, we really have made progress. What we want here is to be 0, because that would mean that there is no gap. And so Cecilia is waiting on the data for 2017-18, and you should have that at the end of October?
I believe so.
Yeah? Okay. So, but in 2016-17, we actually, our economically disadvantaged students did better than the state.
Correct.
So on the performance targets, they're all 0 because we want to make sure that we have no gap. Clearly superior would mean that we're doing better than the state. And then if we get to goal 2, we're using 3rd grade STAR data, and we're stating that we're looking at meets level, not approaches, and we're saying that the achievement is going to improve from 32.5% to 45% in 2022. And you can see the targets for somewhat satisfactory is at 39, so that gives us 0.5 increase from 17-18, 40% for fully satisfactory, and 41 for clearly satisfactory. We had lots of conversations around a KPI around this particular goal, and so we landed on looking at class data, which really looks at the learning environment at the pre-K level, specifically on this KPI. And you can see that there's been significant gains from 2015 to 2018 school year.
Yeah, I think that's worth emphasizing, and those are remarkable gains, considering what we thought was possible and what we've actually achieved. So the goal was to get to 38.5%, and we actually achieved 51.8%. So that's just amazing work and
great results.
Right. Derek, did you want to add to that at all?
I don't think there's much to add, Trustee Mitchke. I mean, we also are really sort of proud and happy by those improvements. To be a little lighthearted for a minute, when we were doing this last year, and I think we were trying to set a target of 40, 45, I told the superintendent I didn't think we would get there. So this was really, really positive, but also something that we want to emphasize, which I think you see the targets for the next year, is improvement of 13 points a year is not realistic. So that's why the targets obviously aren't calling for something in the 60s or 70s moving forward, because this is difficult progress to make despite the great gains that we saw year over year.
And then if we go to KPI 2.2, we're looking at a standardized reading assessment at second grade, and we're using the ISIP data, and EOY stands for end of year data. So we're saying 56% to 58% by 2022. Our targets, somewhat satisfactory is 56.7, and then we go up to fully satisfactory is 57%, and then clearly superior is 57.3%. Cecilia, do you want to talk a little bit about the rigor of making those targets?
Yes, and this is a norm reference test, and so the majority, to be on grade level, the majority are going to be at the 50th percentile, and so to have the distribution be better than the national norm is really hard. You know, I mean, if you're going to have 70% above the 50th percentile, that's really over and beyond. So we are looking at more than the 50th percentile because we are doing real intentional work, and I think we could do that, and I believe it's at the 40th percentile, so you would want to at least have 60% there. So this is pretty rigorous in itself. Moving, and you can see the movement is, inching. It's in the 10th place. So we're thinking that we can continue that movement, but not going to be in the whole numbers. It's going to be in the tenths.
Okay, thank you. So then we go to goal 3, and goal 3 is really about college and career military ready. And we've aligned this goal with what the state uses on Domain 1, and we're looking at the secondary level so that we look at the CCMR. So you can see the history. We haven't tracked that because this is really a new formula from the state, but you can see we do have 17-18 data, and currently we're at 45%. The goal is, the baseline was 45%, and we're stating that we'll get to 50% in 2022. And you see in parentheses, this is lag data, so we're in the rears.
And does that goal match up to the state goals? Is that what you were saying on career, college and career military readiness?
Yeah, it's exactly what the state uses. We're really pulling it from Domain 1, from our state accountability. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So we drafted 3 KPIs for this particular goal. The first, the district has put significant or invested in early college and collegiate academies. So we thought it would be prudent to create a KPI on the percentage of students who achieve an associate's degree. So on 2016-17, Cecilia, that's only from the 3 early colleges, right?
And
For
no, it does
2016.
include Samuel.
For 2016-17
Yes.
as well? Okay. So we had a significant jump from 2016-17 to 17-18.
It's red though, because we're still trying to verify.
Right.
But we know it's what we have right now, that's where we're showing, but we're trying to validate that. And so Usama's working on that.
Right. So we're having.
When will that information be ready, final for the committee to consider?
I'm hoping by the 18th. I'm getting her graduate file, and she's going to have the principals test it, check it, and that's what we got from DCCM. Didn't seem, there was some weirdness about it, so we're just trying to.
And also just a reminder to the board that right now, in cohort 1 of the other 8, those are just juniors. So next year, those students will be seniors, but also we have to wait until they graduate to go back and look at that data. So as you look out to out years, as you set those performance targets, it'll be really important to see what kind of data we have. And remember that the standalone colleges have a lot of history. They have 10 years of history, whereas these new school within a school are more recent. And we're monitoring that performance. But setting targets for this year is one thing, but in the future, this will take other conversations.
So, Trustee
Can
Jones.
I just comment on that real quick? So I mean, my take on this KPI, as more of our collegiate academies that are comprehensive high schools start to roll in, I'm reminded of the fact that I think Newman-Smith, or Neiman Marcus as I like to call it, the early college high school at Newman-Smith, which is a quasi-suburban school district, is like 35%. Right, so I think that we need to bear in mind that that Gillum and Trinity Garza and those standalones are a different beast than the new stream of schools that are going to go in. And so I would actually expect this number to go down as more of the schools enter. We want it to stay up, but I don't think that that's realistic.
Right. And so we've been talking about, what will we use as our base, and would that be an average of these two values that we have from the last 2 years? Or could we look at the state to see where they are? So if you have any input on, methodology we should use for the base, we'd be more than happy to take that.
And Usama had indicated that nationally it's like 30%. So, we need to capture all that as we go forward.
Did you give any other thought on how we could use progress at the collegiate academies, the new ones, the new 18, before they actually graduate? So as Dr. Hinoz said, it's going to be 3 or 4 years before we have the data on these first couple of cohorts. But is there any other significant data that we should be looking at to make sure we're on the right path?
Yeah, there are some other data sets that we probably need to bring to the committee. For example, right now they're doing significantly well on passing end of course exams while they're in there, but that's not necessarily related to the associate's degree. Or you could measure credits that they've earned,
Dual credit.
TSI, dual credits that they've actually earned. Even though they may not be an associate's degree, there are many of us earning significant credits. So maybe we ought to do an inventory of how many cohort 1, how many credits those kids earned on average. So we'll have a database, and then see what cohort 2 did after year 1, and then maybe we can have more formative, with the associate's degree being the summative, but there are formatives along the way to show what progress we're actually making. So those are data sets we can certainly collect.
Yeah, I would certainly like to explore that a little bit more, because, this is one of our really important goals, but the collegiate academies are also a huge part of our strategic initiatives, and it would seem that we should make an effort, if we can do so in a reasonable and reliable way, to measure what kind of progress we're making at the collegiate academies, instead of just waiting until 4 years from now to look at it.
And I think I'm going to pull up my evaluation, but we do have an evaluation on that. I think we track that. If not, we can start. Yeah,
There's an evaluation on it. So, Trustee Mishke, are you recommending that we add a KPI, or we substitute that one for now for this year?
Either one. I'd like your thoughts on how to address what I see as maybe a missing piece, that we've got a significant investment in the collegiate academies, and it's one of our strategic initiatives, and the goal is to be career and college ready. And so how are we doing? How can we measure that before graduation?
And I concur. And if you look at the value of the points, we have 6 on the goal. Then we have 2, 3, 2. So maybe if we if KPI 2 went down to 2, and we put KPI 3.1 as 2, and then we came up with another one, KPI 3.1.1 or 0.2, and added how many students are on track. And if you're on track to get an associate's degree, that means there's, at the end of freshman year, how many of them are on track? At sophomore year, but we'll have to have Osama and that team go back and do some data to come up with if we added a fourth KPI and put less value on it till we collect more data, but it's on, because really if you look at the overall goal, graduates who are college and career, military ready, these kids are going to be college ready because they would have already earned college credits. So maybe we need to have a separate one. But let's go back and see what data do we have that shows how many of them are on track to gaining over 45 college hours or something like that.
All right, great.
Domain 1, the CCMR, includes the number of associate degrees, but again, they're lagged. So it included the number we had before in this last one. So, but it's part of it. And you have to just, as a student, have one of the, either you have the AP or you have the associates or you have the SAT or you have ACT. You know, so any one of those, you can have multiples, but you counted once. And that's
Okay, yeah, so if you all
Yeah,
would
we'll look
think
at it.
through it and
We'll
and
bring
come up with a
something,
recommendation
on
if you
the
think it
18th.
makes sense. Okay.
Absolutely.
Trustee Flores.
So I was gonna say, I mean, the one thing we don't have a KPI on, and we have an extra 2 points, because these only add up to 13, is the career part of it. You know, as we're starting to look at the career institutes and maybe expanding those.
Okay. The Career Institutes.
And I don't know what those numbers look like right now, but if that would be another part of this, right? The college, the career.
well, that's part of domain 1.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm just saying that but we're still breaking out the collegiate academies, we're breaking out the 9th graders, we're breaking out the participating in IB, AP,
So we can
dual
capture
credit. I
career.
guess the CTE courses are in there, maybe
Yeah.
I just.
And thanks for bringing up that should be other points. We need to add a few more points.
I think there was 333.
Yeah. Okay, so then we go to KPI 3.2, and that's looking at 9th grade cohort, so that the students, the 9th graders, have earned, was it 5 credits? 5 credits for that year, as well as they haven't received more than 1 F. So, yeah, in a core course. So that would mean that they would be on track. So currently, I mean, we've tracked that for multiple years. So 17-18, we were at 79.7% of our 9th graders were on track. And then you can see the targets. So our fully successful would be at 81.5. KPI 3.3 is really looking at the students participating in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual credit, and CTE. So we're waiting on that value. You see the red question mark, and Cecilia will have that later in October, hopefully before our October 18th meeting. So we've projected that at 65% for fully satisfactory.
If I could go back to 3.2.
Sure.
I mean, I'm glad we have a measurement like this on here, because I think one of the problems that doesn't get very well noticed is, you know, we use the official graduation standards, right, and just like everybody else in the state does and in the nation does, and we've got an 89% graduation rate. But when you look at the size of the 9th grade class and you compare it to the size of the 12th grade class, just in a rough measurement, you see that the 12th grade class is much, much smaller than the 9th grade class. And if you're tracking the cohorts, you can actually be more precise. But are you saying that our baseline right now is, if we had a 9th grade class that started with 1,000 kids, that where we ended up in 27-18 we had 797 of them graduating. Is that how I
Right,
translate
so
that?
well, it's, yeah, 79.7%, correct.
No. Are we talking about ninth grade on track?
Ninth grade cohort.
We're looking at the end of ninth grade, how many are on track that have gone through the 5 credits that don't have more than one core course gap. Because the research out of Chicago Consortium has indicated if they're on track after ninth grade, they have a greater probability of graduating. So,
But that's 79%,
yes.
79.7%.
Yeah, so I thought you said something by senior year, and it's just that year. That's
Well,
how.
he said 1,000, we had 1,000 ninth graders
Okay.
with
that's
that
what I
being,
said.
yeah. So out of those 1,000
Okay.
ninth graders, 79.7% would be on track.
At the end of ninth grade.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's a different measurement to try to track the same issue, which is, you know, we lose a lot of kids between ninth grade and 12th grade.
The graduation rate is what I think you're talking about. They start with the ninth graders at that cohort and see how many are graduating. If that's what you're talking about. That's also embedded in domain 1, but it's not part of here, but it's been part of this before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to digress too much on this, but the problem I'm seeing is that you'll have 1,000 kids in ninth grade, and by the time they get to 12th grade, there's maybe, my impression is maybe 60 or 65% of those kids are actually walking across the stage with a diploma. And I'm not, you know, I understand there's transfers and all that, but the sheer size of the ninth grade class versus the 12th grade class is something that's always troubled me.
Yeah, and that's partially misleading, because you got first-time ninth graders, and if they don't earn 5 credits, they're still ninth graders. Instead of moving to 10th grade, they're still ninth graders the next year. So that class looks artificially bigger. It's not by cohort age, it's by how many credits you earned. So therefore, the 10th grade class is also going to be smaller than the ninth grade class. That's because up until now, you get past to the next grade level. When you get to ninth grade, you got to earn 5 credits to become a sophomore. And the ones that don't are also year 2 freshmen. And that's why that freshman class always looks bigger. But you're right, we ought to dissect a particular class of 2017. And we ought to back those up all the way back and how many of them made it. And then take into consideration, you know, who went to charter schools, went to other districts, who went to all that. But it's a different issue, but I understand the point. So, but it just becomes exacerbated because you don't get out of ninth unless you get 5 credits.
Okay, for now, I mean, I'm okay with going with what you and Dr. Oakley have described, but I do want to see us focus on that issue, and maybe in the next round, we can figure out a way to make sure that we're addressing those lost students.
Any questions on KPI 3.3? No? Okay. Goal number 4 actually is the exact same as the goal, as our district goal. And we just, you know, the content is the same, the wording's the same. Our baseline on the goal is 59%. We're stating that we're going to go to 79% by 2022. And you can see the targets in blue. A fully satisfactory is 76.5%. Cecilia, did you want to say anything about that?
I think,
Sherry.
yeah, the only, some of the elementary are really getting maximum participation, but the high school and middle school, they're at a kind of a point where they can't get more. I don't know that they can't get more, but we're maxing out there too. So the numbers have to reflect the total, that goal has to reflect the total population. And so you have to adjust based on the elementary and secondary. So you can maybe get more movement at one, but because there's larger numbers at elementary and you're already there, the movement's going to be slower now. Because now you're trying to move the secondary to participate, because most of the elementary have high participation rates.
We're not going to see another 20-point gain
I don't think so.
from 76 to 96.
That's what she said.
Yes.
Okay.
And according to, and also listening to what Sherry and Stephanie were talking about, yes.
And then you can see the KPIs is really just dissecting or deconstructing the goal. So KPI 4.1 is specifically for elementary. KPI 4.2 is middle school, and 4.3 is high school.
Another really phenomenal job in that area.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
The schools have done a great job. Yeah. The next section is 20% of the instrument, and you can see the financial management piece there. Dr. Yost, you want to take that?
Yes, and of course, Larry's working with the external auditors, and the first item comes from the external auditors, and right now we don't have any indication that it'd be other than 1 or 0 for the past year. So setting that target is similar to what we've done in the past. The general fund surplus, we think also is going to be a positive. Part of that was some good news that we didn't anticipate on some items, but once again, that has to be verified by the external auditor on the general fund surplus, and that'll be done this month. And so we're projecting that if it's next year, we don't have to take into consideration any sale of property. So as long as we don't bust the budget, as long as we come in at least at a balanced budget, we'll get somewhat satisfactory. If we increase our fund balance by $5 million, you'll get 1, and then if you increase it by, well, 10 million, it'll be 1.5. There needs to be an asterisk here, though, because a lot depends on whether this tax ratification election passes or not. Because if it passes, I don't need to be given credit because the TRE passed on my evaluation, because then you would have to add the 126 million plus the 5 million. So it had to be, our fund balance had to grow by 130 million for me to get credit. So there needs to be some kind of notation here, depending on the outcome of the tax ratification election. And then the first is the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. That's done externally, and we'll get notification at a certain point. They used to have scale differentiation of performance. Now it's just, you cannot get bonus points on that. S is the highest you can go. So there's no points, no bonus points for clearly superior for that category. So those are the 3 financial ones. If you want to have some other discussion or make some changes, obviously we'll take that into consideration. But as of right now, we'll need to have an asterisk on the fund surplus depending on the status of the TRE. Any questions on that?
I appreciate you pointing that out. I think that's a good adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So then the last portion is 20% for stakeholder input or satisfaction. And you can see all of the various stakeholders, including the Board of Trustees, school staff. We take that from the climate survey that goes out. And you can see in 17-18, we were at 69.6%. In order to get to fully satisfactory, we have a target set for 71%. For parents, our last year, 17-18, was 84%. We're going up 1% to 85% for fully satisfactory. Students, we're at 75, and we're going to 75.5%. And that's just looking at the history. You see we were pretty stagnant from 2016-17 to 17-18. Then the last one is taxpayer. We're at 39.3%, and fully satisfactory, we're saying 40%.
How do you measure the taxpayer?
We do it.
We use an external vendor, and they sample the district. We make sure there's a representation from all the zip codes, and they first try to do an email because they have some versions, and if they don't meet the sampling or the demographics, they make phone calls. And so the sample size then asks the question, several questions. And I have a full report I have available also. That details all that.
But ironically, that matches a lot of the polling for the TRE. It's very similar, and actually we've gone down in taxpayer support the last 3 years. So it is what it is.
And then for the Board of Trustees, the superintendent will provide you a survey.
Actually, the board president will provide them on a survey Thursday, and I'll have to step out of that meeting when y'all will fill that 10-point question. And we have prior data, that's the only part of this evaluation that's actually confidential, is how, what the board, that 4%. But you'll have the prior years, you'll fill out the forms, you'll give it to the board president. In the past, they've used the attorney to collect that information. We don't see it until we get the final results. And that's the only portion of my evaluation that's actually confidential.
And then in the far right-hand corner, you see the date available, and we'll have those filled in. But you can see when that data comes in. So we even have data actually for this year coming in, in the next couple of weeks.
So I have a question on the customer satisfaction survey of parents and how detailed that is, because my perception of what's going on is just based on how many calls I get about late buses or difficulties with enrollment or not responding to fixing the playground, things like that. I get the whole gamut, and I'm wondering, since I don't see those parent surveys, if we could break those down so that they could provide, if they don't already provide, meaningful input and information to the to the administration as to what they need to work on. So
the parent department, parent resources,
Family engagement.
they're the ones that really initiate this, because they also, there's several questions that we use, that we use for this, actually one question, and then there's more, because it's for Title I and everything, and they do have the breakdown, and we do provide that to the campuses. So for example, the first one is, I believe what my child learned this year is what he or she needed to learn to be be ready for the next grade. My child's school has a respectful learning environment. So things like that, and so they do work with them, and then it'll even help them.
Okay, well, sometimes you'll get low scores because people are mad, right? And we need to be able to, if we're going to do a survey, isolate what's bothering them. So, my child takes the bus and it's always late. I tried to enroll on the new electronic enrollment system, and I couldn't do it. I mean, just give some thought into what the problems are, so that parents can signal to us where the district is showing needs for improvement. I certainly like the questions that you've asked, but just some of these basic operational things that have been causing an avalanche of complaints, and you know about them, obviously, and you've been addressing them. But I would like to get a feel for, are we just hearing noisy small groups on one problem, or is it across the board at every school? So if you think about the things that we've had to address over the years, and certainly I can.
Yeah, they're not real specific, but there is one that says my child's school responds to my concerns in a timely manner. So make it to some of them, but we don't know what the concerns are, to your point.
Yeah.
But whatever their concern was, is
right. So if people are unhappy with the bus service, right, they're going to grade us low on that. But we're not going to really know if it's just the bus service, but they love everything else that the principal is doing on campus. So just more specific questions that might give us input on where we need to improve.
No, I think that's good. We can do that.
Anybody else?
Could you read the respect question again?
The what?
The respect question?
My child's school has a respectful learning environment. Sorry. I'm sorry, I don't know which one.
Could we provide that
Yeah, let me just,
to the trustees?
what was it that I said? Because that's the one I see.
I
with
think the one you
respect.
were reading, you were saying.
My child's school has a respectful learning environment. I don't think that was what I said.
What are the options for answers?
Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. I don't know.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I was processing. Yeah, the thing that kind of goes to Dan's point is that I think about answering that question myself. If there's, I mean, how do you distinguish between if there's one terrible occurrence on the first day of school and if that doesn't judge the overall respectfulness of the school? So someone might have had something happen on the first day of school that makes them think that it's not a respectful environment, but if they're taking it in its totality, it was. So if you frame the question, I don't do this, but my child, if it was more like frequently, all the time, sometimes, then you get a better sense of the one time. You get an idea of whether it was a one-time occurrence, something that was persistent, something that was throughout the school, something that just happened. You get a better idea of, because if it's my child and one thing happens to him, then I might interpret that as this is not a respectful environment. But if you had asked me, how often is it a respectful environment? And I said it was just the first day of school, that's a whole different issue.
And they're
And
asking
severity.
this in the spring, late spring.
There should be a way to gauge severity of these questions and whether it's a small issue or a big issue. And I think the way that's written, a small issue could seem much more severe than it is. Not that any instance is acceptable, but a kid getting bullied one day and then the school addressing it and it never happens again is different than a kid getting bullied once a month or once a week. Both are disrespectful environments,
Sure.
whether it's once or 100.
So the next steps that we can do between now and when that survey goes out is work with the family engagement department and really look at specificity as well as just the intensity or the frequency or severity of that concern.
Trustee Ford.
So can I add a different dimension on that?
Sure.
Because I think that's a very, very good point. But also, when you ask a learning environment, as a parent, I would say, okay, what's going on in the classroom, or maybe, the specials or gym or anything like that. But I would answer that question if I thought, I would have thought, yeah, my kids' teachers were great, I liked them, but I could have been treated really poorly in the office.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't call that the learning environment. Right, I would just differentiate in my mind when answering that question. Was my kiddo happy with their teacher and doing great versus they treated me like, terribly at the front office.
Right.
The customer service aspect of it. To me would have been it's a different question than the learning environment.
Right. Do we have customer service in that?
I think so. I think we did, because that was one of the things
Yes.
we changed for this year. I'm looking at
So see, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for the purposes of my evaluation, there's one question that says the district is headed in the right direction, and that's kind of where you get some of the responses from those individual groups. Some of these same surveys are used at individual campuses, or are all these part of the same, just for the superintendent's evaluation?
Yeah,
I think that's the school staff. The
Yes, that's the
district
school
is-
staff.
Yeah, so we have the climate survey.
this
as-
is the percent
yeah.
positive for the first 10 questions.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's a good point. We obviously are focused on the superintendent's evaluation, but the fact that we're going to be doing these surveys, and it gives us an opportunity. We're paying somebody to help us come up with the surveys. We're taking all this data. We want to improve customer service. It seems like this is sort of a no additional marginal cost to get more questions in there that are focused, that we could use. to improve customer service.
I think so. We do have something about my child's school responds to my concerns in time manner. I feel comfortable interacting with the personnel. My child school stresses the importance of preparing, attending college. Let's see. I'm satisfied. There is I'm satisfied with the direction and success of my child's school, but I need to double check because I can't remember all of a sudden. I thought I saw something. Oh, I just saw it, but I lost it about the customer service is where I was looking for. So we'll just get you a copy.
And we can make sure, there's time, of course, to modify and tweak that. So I think that your recommendations are well taken.
Okay, so next steps.
So we'll, we've taken notes based off of our conversation. We'll come back October 18th to this group to share this with you again, to make sure the committee is good with it, and then we'll bring it to the full board in November. October 15th, we do need to share this with the DAC, or the District Advisory Committee, and so either Trustee Mishke, if you would like to do that, then you certainly would be welcome, and Trustee Flores has also said that he would be open to doing it.
Okay, I think I can make that, but either way, Edwin, if you can attend, that would be great.
And it's 4 to 6 o'clock, but I can certainly put you on the agenda, so that it meets your schedule.
Trustee Henry.
Before I think we're wrapping up. Before we wrap up, I have I expressed it to you separately, but the KPI 1.4 around African American ELL, I'd like y'all to explore beyond just literacy. The other thing that in regards to that was the idea of growth. So even if these, similar to what you did in KPI 1.5, where you're comparing the state economically disadvantaged to the district, I think we should be evaluating for closing the gap within our own district with African American and ELL students and the rest of the students. Because I think if you increase it, 1 percentile point a year, if the other groups are increasing by any percentage more than that, then you're actually losing ground. You talk about closing gaps. And then the other thing, I'm just going to talk about this all the time, but just a hard number of 29% literacy. To maintain that, what's the essence again? To maintain that and then define ourselves as somewhat successful, to me, is incorrect. I think if we stay at 29% literacy of African Americans, that's not somewhat acceptable. And 30% is not fully successful. And I understand it's difficult across the nation, historically, in this district and many others, but I think we've done phenomenal things that we see here, whether it's extracurricular, whether it's from moving IR schools, or, there's a list of great things the ISD can do with great people. So I think this is one of those things that we can do with great people if it's actually a goal that's ambitious. So that's my feedback in regards to the student outcome achievements.
So you would recommend that instead of looking at meets for the student group, African American students, for us to look at the gap of African American students and other.
Yeah, I know we're limited on how many KPIs we can have, but I think it's important just generally when looking at student data, where our kids are at, hard numbers, normalized against other kids, and then also are we growing our kids? The same way we evaluate our educators, where is the kid at, but also are you growing your kids?
2 points. Number one, we have goal progress measures that are separate from KPIs on my instrument that are more rigorous for the district. But also, my question for Pam, did we take this through the same rigorous process that if we want to be at a certain point by 2022, is 1 point going to get us there? I think we probably need to back in that. If we want to be at a certain point by 22, what do we need to get in the next few years to get there? So I do expect that these will come back a little different, but also I want to show you, Trustee Henry, we have these indicators and goal progress measures in other areas. This is just the evaluation of the superintendent, and I'm certainly willing to accept a more rigorous, because if we have a bigger gap to go there, we need to have more progress than just incremental progress. So we'll take a look at that and come back with something a little bit different.
Thank Thank you. And that concludes our presentation.
All right.
Sorry, I always want to try to balance this, but just to be clear, I think the district is making a huge commitment beyond what a lot of urban school districts are doing in regards to racial equity and achievement of African Americans. Even naming this in a superintendent survey, I think we test kind of doubt a lot of superintendents have this type of criterion in their evaluation or name it explicitly in policy. So, again, I think our district is doing a great job, good job. I know we can do a lot better.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I would second those comments. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, the time is now 2:58 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.
You may as well.